Welcome to the Histories of Northamptonshire podcast series, and this episode number 71. Recorded on location, each episode tells the story of one of the many and varied objects which are the focus of the exhibition A History of Northamptonshire in 100 Objects. The exhibition runs at the Northampton Museum and Art Gallery between the 20th of September 2025 and February 2026. Selected by local individuals, heritage groups and the museum's own curators, each object tells a different story from the county's past. And so, to our guests for this episode.
My name's Paul Saunders.
And I'm Liz Saunders.
And what is the organisation that the two of you are representing in this particular podcast?
Well, we are kind of representing a Morris dance side that we both belong to, but not just that Morris dance side. Morris dancing in Northamptonshire in general.
So it's Rose and Castle Morris, but we have been associated with other Morris sides within the county over the past 30 years.
Very much associated with country life, and perhaps life of a certain age. What, though, is Morris dancing? What is the point of Morris dancing?
Well, the point of Morris dancing is to have fun and to dance. Every society dances, and this is how English society, common folk, if you like, danced in the past. But there are various forms of Morris dancing. So the one that everybody thinks about when you say Morris dancing is people, particularly men in white trousers and white shirts and cross baldricks and waving hankies. And that's Cotswold Morris, and their dances are traditionally from the different villages in and around the Cotswolds. I say in and around the Cotswold because it extends as far as Brackley, Badbury and even Lichfield, which in no way is in the Cotswolds. It's in Staffordshire. However, they count those as Cotswold-style dances. Then there are Border Morris sides. They have traditional dances from the Herefordshire, Shropshire, borders of England and Wales. Then there's the sort of dancing that we do in Rose and Castle, which is North West Morris, which is from the mill towns and is post-industrial revolution.
So this is the medium of dancing, but it's a regionalised form of dancing which tells stories of those areas?
Sort of. This tells the stories of why they were doing it. So the Cotswold one is much more of a summer entertainment. They danced at fetes and high days and holidays in the summer. The Border Morris was done more in the winter, and it was done when there was no work to be had, and they'd go around begging, so hence they disguise their faces in some way, shape or form, and they go to the next village, not their own village.
So this is very much a form of social expression through dance then?
Very much.
Paul, the object that we're talking about today, just describe the object for us, if you would.
The object itself, known as a hobby horse, it's worn by somebody, and you can think of a person sitting on a horse. It looks like they're sitting on a horse with the head projecting out the front and the tail at the back, and a sort of a cloth around the sides. And hobby horses have been around pre-Shakespeare's time, led around the set by Maid Marian, who's actually a man dressed as Maid Marian.
That's a point. Liz, clearly you're a lady. Often Morris men are Morris men. But you have an involvement in that. There are ladies who dance. There are also ladies who are musicians.
Yes, we have female dancers and musicians now. We used to be an all-male dancing side, but we've always had female musicians. There was a conceit that women never danced the Morris after the First World War, when women had to be put back where they should have been. So hence women's football was banned, and men devised this conceit that women didn't dance the Morris, even though they'd kept it going.
Why Morris? Why is it Morris dancing?
There is one theory that it came from Moorish dancing, that they saw people out in the Crusades, they saw people dancing, and it was a way of learning to sword fight and be nimble on the balls of your feet. When you see dances from the Basque Country, you can see similarities. There are it's fascinating how similarities of dance all over Europe.
So this is true global heritage.
In many ways, yeah, it came back to be very English, but we don't know where the roots are from.
Paul, Yardley Gobion is where you guys come from. So is this inherently a Yardley Gobion object?
Oh, it is, yes. The Yardley Gobion Morris dance was started by Thomas Cadd in about 1890. He'd seen Morris dances when he was a boy. He lived in a place not far from Brackley, Preston Bissett, and had seen the Brackley Morris dances as a child. Sometime later, he'd been asked by one of the gentry in Yardley Gobion, where he lived, to pull together a Morris dancing side. Now, strangely, before moving to Yardley Gobion, he travelled around the country a bit and had lived up in Lancashire. He'd obviously seen the northwest style of Morris dancing that Liz referred to earlier. So the Cotswold dancing is 6 men with hankies and sticks doing a particular type of stepping. The northwest style is normally columns of usually 8. The little we do know about the dances that were done by Thomas Cadd and his Morris dances were that they were in sets of 8. We have some brief descriptions of the type of stepping they did. So we know that there were these northwest influences.
So the horse, the outfit, the object that we have here, is that from the Cotswolds or is that from the Northwest?
That's definitely from the Cotswolds.
So Thomas Cadd then borrowed elements of Morris dancing from different parts of the UK, distilled them down into something which, Liz, you've not described as Northamptonshire dance, but we're not really in the Cotswolds either. So is this inherently and uniquely Northamptonshire from Yardley Gobion?
It is, absolutely.
Yeah.
Any Cotswold aficionado would say that it is not Cotswold dancing because the structure's slightly different, the stepping is different. But he has used some elements of the Cotswolds, in particular the hobby horse and the Maid Marian that we spoke about.
So we've got dancing that relates to the streets. We've got a hobby horse which borrows from the Cotswolds. We've now got a new style of dancing and a new form of expression. What about the outfit itself? What about the costume, if I can call it that? Where do Morris men groups go to get their costumes? Presumably they're homemade, aren't they?
Yes, there's kind of a uniform that the sides adopt. In the Cotswold, as Liz mentioned, it tended to be white trousers, white shirt, and these things called baldricks. Baldricks are cross ribbons that go across the chest. The northwest dancers would tend to have big heavy clogs on their feet, and they would have sticks that they don't clash together, they just wave when they're dancing. The Cotswold dances tend to have sticks that they smash together vigorously.
The outfit that we have in the exhibition, it would have been worn by one of the dancers, an elemental part of the dance?
Supplementary to the dance, so it probably wouldn't have been worn by one of the dancers who was in the dance. Quite often people, as they realise they can't dance anymore, take on the hobby horse role. And when we say hobby horse, there are unicorns, there are all sorts of mythical and other creatures that sides will adopt as their hobby horse.
And it would charge around in the vicinity of the dancing set. Thomas Cadd, the leader of the dancers, used to have a stick with a bull's bladder, an inflated bull's bladder on it, which he would smack the horse and members of the audience. So that's part of the entertainment.
There's a bit of participation in that case. You become a target for Thomas Cadd. What's the reaction to Thomas Cadd, this innovator in Yardley Gobion and therefore in Northamptonshire? Did he make a reputation for himself?
Oh yes, definitely. When he started that, the young men were actually men, adults, doing the dance. But he found to his dismay that after the first set of dancing, they would get a bit hot and have a drink and be more or less incapable of dancing throughout the rest of the afternoon.
It's heavy work.
So he moved to groups of young boys. He preferred working with young boys as dancers because he didn't have that problem of inebriation.
Liz, I think the object itself is the production and the work of a lady from Yardley Gobion.
Yes.
And she, in her own right, was innovative in the way that this particular hobby horse was made, in terms of its structure, its fabrication.
Yes.
Mrs. Leach.
Mrs. Leach. So she used what was available, an old basket that she then fashioned with fabric with a skirt and braces, I think, to go over. And that is really what Morris dancing is all about. It's using what's available. Going back to Cotswold, they would have had shirts and trousers easily available, light ones, because of working in the fields. The Northwest, their costumes tend to be more militaristic, and because a lot of them would have come out of the military and gone to work in the mills, and so that's reflected in that. And the border, it was about having a jacket that you just pinned rags on so you couldn't see it was a jacket. So it's all about using what's available.
It's fascinating to see the origins of Morris dancing. And it's fascinating to see that Northamptonshire does have a form of Morris dancing through Thomas Cadd from Yardley Gobion. Why should this particular part of the toolkit for Morris dancers, why should it be in the exhibition, in your opinion?
In a way, it helps keep the memory of that particular time alive. Because Thomas Cadd and his dancers stopped dancing in about 1925, which coincidentally is 100 years ago, it hasn't been used since then, and probably will never be used for Morris dancing because it's probably a bit fragile now. The Yardley Gobion School in 1954, they put together a school side for one fete in the 1950s, and in 2022, Rosencastle Morris put together a Yardley Gobion Morris dance that we performed in the village at the pub. And one of the village ladies, who's granddaughter of Thomas Cadd, came over and said, "That's just like I remember it."
So it's an echo of the past, mirroring the social change, the social times, and based in Yardley Gobion. Why is this inherently Northamptonshire, Liz?
It's the unusual elements of the dance make it Northamptonshire. So it's Thomas Cadd's putting together of the Yardley dance that makes it such an unusual dance. The Brackley dances, they're Morris dances, they're a Northamptonshire tradition as well. But Yardley's Morris dance is unique.
It's worth mentioning two very important figures in the history of Morris dancing. In Victorian times, there was a lady known as Mary Neal and a man, Cecil Sharp. They were acquaintances of each other, but they worked independently on collecting Morris dances, which meant going out to villages, interviewing old folk, asking them about the music and the dances they did. In 1909, Mary Neal invited Thomas Cadd down to London to talk to her group about his dances. Unfortunately, she considered them not very historical, so she didn't include them in her books. In 1910, Cecil Sharp also came to visit Thomas and talked about his dances. He came to the same conclusion, unfortunately, that because they were kind of revivalist and not actually traditional, they didn't really make it onto his list of important things.
Nevertheless, it's very much of community, and I'm fascinated to see that Northamptonshire has its own kind of Morris dancing, which brings elements of different Morris dancers from different parts of the United Kingdom. Once again, we have this sort of bringing together of other aspects and other elements through the work of this man based in Yardley Gobion. Thank you so much for coming in and talking about it today. People can obviously come and have a look at the item itself. One final question. If it's never going to get used again, is anybody or has anybody recreated it, and do you use a contemporary version of this item in your dances? And if not, should you?
We don't. However, perhaps when we do the Yardley Gobion dance, we should have a petite hobby horse rushing around. I don't know.
Perhaps when we do this again, we'll be talking about the 21st century hobby horse rather than one from back in the day. Paul, Liz, lovely to have you in. Thanks very much indeed.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this Histories of Northamptonshire podcast. If you would like to find out more about the objects or listen to other episodes in the series, go to www.northamptonmuseums.com. Alternatively, you can visit the Northampton Museum and Art Gallery, where you can see the A History of Northamptonshire in 100 Objects exhibition for yourself. The Histories of Northamptonshire project is funded by Arts Council England as part of the National Portfolio Programme.